Hey everyone. Now, whenever there's a problem in IT, the joke answer is always that it's DNS. It's always DNS, right? Or it's at least DNS adjacent. And while there's some truth to that, the fact is that DNS is a very, very, very critical component of all of our networks and our infrastructure and just the web in general, right? Now, if you're a regular viewer, we've kind of been on a stint of fundamentals type episodes here. And I've long wanted to do a DNS episode to really deep dive DNS. How does the name resolution process work? What are the common DNS records? What are some common DNS pitfalls? Share some horror stories that myself and Eric, my co-host in today's episode, have run into in terms of DNS. I mean, there's a lot of material to be had for a podcast like this around DNS. And so that's what Eric and I are going to dive into today, DNS specifically. So whether you're new to IT or whether you've been in the industry for, decades like Eric and I have, I think there's going to be a little bit of something for everyone in this episode. So hope you enjoy. Here we go. Hey everyone, it's a new week. That means it's time for another episode of SysAdmin Weekly. This is your podcast by sysadmins, for sysadmins, and dedicated to all the tireless tech folks working in the trenches every day to keep our digital world spinning. As always, I'm your host, Andy Serwich, and as always, I've got Eric Siren with me today. How's it going, Eric?
I'm doing good. How are you doing, Andy?
Doing good. It dawns on me, I say, as always, I didn't come off sarcastic. I really hope it didn't, because it wasn't intended that way. I was just overly enthusiastic with my intro.
Well, I've been on a lot lately, so I think it's not entirely far off from the truth. So,
I mean, I could have been like, oh, God, I got Eric on again, you guys. I hope this thing's going to go all right. No, of course.
There's again. Notice more and more people checking out and way more thumbs down. It's just getting terrible now.
No, you're a great guest, my friend. Great guest. Good co-host. So always good to have you. So we have a bit of a fundamentals episode today. I know we've been doing that a little bit. We had two fundamentals episodes kind of around Hyper-V. Today we are talking, what do I want to say? We are talking about the SysAdmin final boss. We're talking about DNS today. Now, whether DNS is the final boss or not is a matter of scholarly debate, I'll say. But in a lot of cases, I jokingly would say that DNS is the final boss. And so we're going to talk about DNS. We're going to talk about some basics, but we're going to talk about where DNS has bit us a couple of times throughout our careers. And we'll go through a lot of DNS particulars as well. So, but before we get to that, we have our usual recurring segments to get to. We've got our News React segment and our Nerd Hour segment. So we're going to start with the News React. And I have been on leave and have been living under a rock for about the last 10 days. So I don't really have I guess, an official news item. It's news to me, something new I learned related to DNS, ironically. So as I've mentioned on the show before, I am a regular listener of the Security Now podcast. Steve Gibson over there is just fantastic source of information. And excuse me, they were talking about Cloudflare DNS on one of the latest episodes. And I never knew this. Like I said, this is news to me. So everybody uses 1.1.1.1 as their DNS source, right? Their resolver DNS. And that's the most commonly known Cloudflare public DNS server. Apparently, I've not verified this myself, but I trust Steve Gibson, what he says. Apparently 1.1.1.2 includes DNS filtering as well. So apparently Cloudflare maintains a list of known malicious IPs, and if you try to resolve something to a known malicious IP, it will instead direct you to 0.0.0.0, thus rendering your machine incapable of going to that known malicious IP. And apparently, 1.1.1.3 is even more strict and includes filtering for, let's say, those more adult-oriented content websites. So, I never heard about this before. Some cool information, but that was my new thing learned today. Like I said, not officially news segment item, but kind of. So that's what I'm going with today. I don't know. What do you got for news react segment there, Eric?
Well, I've got two little ones, but both of them made me very happy. One, I was, I don't remember, a few weeks ago at some point, I was like, the world is going to get sick of all this nonsense going on with the way everything is choked down to one or two vendors who are overcharging everybody. I saw a news thing fly by. Somebody is basically in the process of setting up his homestead to make RAM in his backyard. And I don't know that he's got a product yet, but it's coming. And I'm like, I told you so. Told you so.
You called
told
it
you so.
like 8 episodes ago.
I'm so happy to see that. I just like, and I don't know what it's going to do. I don't know where it's going to sit, but like, yeah, I'm telling you, the world is not going to put up with this forever. It's, and so that one made me happy. And the second one that made me happy is companies are now saying that the AI tokens, what they're spending on AI tokens exceeds what they were paying the people that they used the AI to replace.
I saw that. Yep.
Like, there you go. And one more to piggyback right off of that is, and I hope everybody has seen this now, it's great, but I think it was Claude deleted a company's everything, all of it, and the backups, all of it.
I saw that too. Whoops.
But maybe AI is on our side after all.
And I bet you when the admin was like, Claude, what the hell, man? Claude was like,
they did. They asked it, and what did the thing say? It's like, yes, I violated every principle that I was given, or something like that. It's just like, yeah, I did that. Okay.
With that whole mentality, like, oh, you're right to call me out on that. I'm sorry. I could have.
No. Oh, Joe, that was. I don't know.
What about the backups, Claude? Oh yeah, those are gone too.
Yeah,
sorry.
You know what? If you're gonna do anything, all the way.
Oh man, I saw that headline. I didn't read the article, but I did see the headline. I'll have to include that in the show notes because yeah, that's definitely interesting. And the headline I saw about the AI being more expensive, I don't remember what outlet it was, but they worded the headline in such a way that it made it sound like the AI agents were getting laid off, not people. The AI was getting laid off because it was too expensive.
They probably had AI write the headline and.
Yep. Probably. Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. Anyway, so moving on to our Nerd Hour segment. This is the segment of the show where my co-host and I, we talk about the geeky, nerdy things that we've been working on in our spare time. And again, I've been on leave, living under a rock for the last 10 days or so I haven't been doing a ton of nerdy, geeky stuff. Well, I guess I have been playing some video games, so there's maybe a little bit of nerdiness to that. But I will say, as I've mentioned on the show before, I do have a couple of terminal ncurses-based applications that I kind of built with the assistance of AI, by the way. And full disclosure. And basically little tools running on the ncurses library inside of a terminal. Like I wanted a Pomodoro timer inside the terminal, and something inside the terminal that can interact and control Apple Music. Again, just open source those, put them on my GitHub, and I'm thinking like, okay, I'm just putting them there so they're in an external repository somewhere, and if I want to grab them again somewhere down the future for some, I can. But come to find out, like I said, after I've been away on leave, I come back to my Pomo CLI application, and I'm like, pull request, interesting. And so somebody had taken my Pomo CLI app and made it even better. And I've said on the show before, I am not a coder by any stretch of the imagination, right? I can come up with some outside of PowerShell, I'm pretty decent at PowerShell, but any other language, Python included, which is what this is written in, my code tends to be a little bit brittle sometimes. Now, I used AI to clean up my code and make it better than how I wrote it, but I actually made it the whoever the person is. Their pull request looks very solid. Added a lot of cool stuff. So if you're a listener of the show, really appreciate that. I know that pull request has been sitting out there for a few weeks, and I'm just now seeing it. But I'll be taking a look at that and incorporating that into the tool. So they even added a little ASCII tomato that sits in the background of the timer inside of the terminal. So I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool, you know. Anyway, I thought that was pretty neat. And like I said, for sitting around not doing a whole lot of anything for 10 days, that was probably the nerdiest item on my list, was sitting back down to my desk this morning and coming across that. So that's my nerd hour. So what do you got, Eric?
I haven't gotten much. I've been outside a lot because we're in that little time frame where it's not too hot or too cold right now, and I had a
Fleeting.
honeydew list to build new stairs for my in-laws' pool. They were the
Mm.
ones I had were sinking into the ground and treacherous and killing them. So
Uh-oh.
I extended my non-technical stuff and made an outdoor structure for the first time in my life. So I geeked out over that and also terrified, about 12 times as long as a professional would have taken to do it. But you know what? They're sturdy. They ain't pretty, I don't think. They're like, these are so terrible. And everyone's like, no, they're great. I'm like, no, they're not. They're horrible. I hate it, but whatever. But I guess for nerd stuff is in the evenings, and of course my muscles are all destroyed from out there toting around 2x12 lumber, and I don't do
We're not
much.
20
But
anymore.
no, we're not 20 anymore, and uh, yeah. So anyway, kind of goes with today. I'm still like I would like to improve some of the home networking stuff I have, which will include DNS. So I've been researching where I want to go. So we're actually kind of the timing of this episode is kind of nice. I might learn something. So
There we go. There we go. I will probably sing the praises of Piehole throughout this episode, and um because personally and selfishly that's what I use. But yeah, I'm sure we'll have all kinds of ideas about home lab DNS stuff to be tinkered with between now and the end of the episode. So anyway, um boy, Eric, we made it through all of our recurring segments in record time, and we're like 11 minutes into the show. Typically, all this stuff goes until 20 minutes in. So this is crazy. I'm like, I feel like I shouldn't be moving on to the main segment yet, but here we are.
yeah.
So anyway, our main segment today is DNS, right? DNS. It's always DNS is the running joke, right? And that's why I say DNS is the final boss for the sysadmin for a number of reasons. But um I guess this particular episode is designed, I would say, maybe I don't want to say designed. I kind of had the junior sysadmins in mind when I put this particular episode outline together, right? Because DNS is a very fundamental thing. So many of us work with it every day and we don't even think twice about it because it's so ingrained in us. But that said, there's a lot of different pieces of DNS that a lot of sysadmins don't touch. Before I go back into my career, and I was in the industry for, boy, I don't know, 5-6 years before I ever did anything with external DNS records. DNS records outside of the local network, right? So actually configuring, public A records, MX records, NS records for public domains. I didn't touch any of that stuff until several years in. And so, I guess that's one of the big aha moments for me when I was probably 5, 6, 7 years into my career is when I finally started tinkering with that and understood how public DNS records worked. All of a sudden it was like, whoa, okay. I understand the fundamental routing of the internet now, not just at an IP level, but from a name resolution perspective as well, too. Which once you understand that whole process, it makes troubleshooting a lot simpler. And of course, we have our traditional, local network DNS resolution within our own networks as well too, and our home labs and all that stuff. So, um, DNS is DNS, but I think mentally, I'm kind of curious if you're like this too, Eric. Um, I think mentally, I've always kind of separated DNS into two areas in my brain: internal and external DNS, right? Because I mean, yeah, DNS is DNS, but like they always feel just a little bit different, from a configuration perspective. Um, but I mean, like I said, DNS is DNS, but for some reason, my brain separates them for some reason. Anyway, I don't know if you think of it that way too.
I don't know that I do. I mean, I understand, like, or I don't really think I do.
So externally, I guess for me, it's like it's public visibility
Yeah.
into the external services of my particular domain. And for
Yeah,
some reason,
like,
that's like a logical mental boundary for me.
which is
Again, it's
fine.
just
I
a
mean, I'm just
personal
thinking
thing.
like
There's I
every DNS server has a scope,
Yep. Yep.
so I don't know that I put a great deal of like, okay, that one's a public server and anybody in the universe can get to it, and this one isn't.
And
You
and
know,
see, I think that's just a me
I don't
thing.
know.
That's just how
It could
that's
be.
just
I
how
don't see
my
anything
brain
wrong or
that's just how my
just
brain separates it, for some reason. And I guess
I
that's
haven't
how
heard
I
anything.
look at it from a troubleshooting perspective too, because like, if you're troubleshooting DNS within an organization, like, okay, what am I trying to resolve? What name am I trying to resolve? Is it a local network resource? Is it something public? Is it something to do with the public domain of the entity that I'm troubleshooting? I guess from a troubleshooting perspective, that's kind of why I separate the two as well too, because I think about the flow of DNS, right? Um,
Mhm.
and maybe that's why again, that's just how I understand it. But we can kind of step through, and talk about it a little bit more. And maybe I'm the weird one. Like I said, that's just
I
kind of
think
how my
whatever
brain.
works. I'm
Yeah.
really big on it. Whatever works for you. You're not hurting anything, so what's the problem? So
Yep. Yep. And so, to answer the core question, like, what is DNS? DNS, and every sysadmin who's been around for a while has heard this analogy. DNS is the phone book for the internet, right? When I type in my browser, google.com, you know, there's a source somewhere that knows google.com is associated with X IP address, right? And the same applies for your internal network too, right? If your domain controller is DC1, when you ping DC1 on your local network, the DNS service on your local network knows that DC1 equals 192.168.1.10, whatever, right? Um, so again, that's kind of what we're talking about when we talk about DNS. Now, the funny thing is that there's this thing in the industry, right? The joke. It's always DNS. DNS is always broken, right? And I feel like I know it's a joke meme, but I feel like it's partially true. There's so many times I've done troubleshooting throughout my career, and if I had to give a percentage, I'm going completely on gut here, but I bet you 30% of issues are DNS related, at least from where where I've sat in the industry, right? I'll give you an example. And DNS can be maddening sometimes too, because it doesn't always present itself in obvious ways. So let me give you an example here. So this is back in my MSP days. I was, a cloud engineer, a system engineer in the trenches, and I was also the engineer that was responsible for internal systems. And at the time, we were running our internal ticketing system on an internal cluster and an internal SQL database. And for some reason, this plagued me for months. It's like every 3-4 weeks, for some reason, the ticketing system would just fall flat on its face. And Now, again, on MSP, we have SLAs that we have to meet for ticket resolution, right? So, like, this is a mission critical system. Like, this thing has to be up. And it always happens, seemed to happen during the middle of the day. And the quickest thing to do is just bounce the server and everybody could start working again, right? I was never given a chance to, like, okay, let's let this thing be broken for half an hour while I troubleshoot and try to figure things out. Come to find out, and there's a little technical debt involved in this conversation too, which I'm sure we'll get to a little bit later in the conversation. Most small to medium organizations, in my experience, typically have 2 domain controllers, right? For redundancy purposes. For some reason, I had inherited the responsibilities of maintaining our internal systems. For some reason, come to find out, there were actually 4 domain controllers in this particular environment. And 2 of them were older. I don't remember exactly what version of Windows Server, but they were an older version of Windows Server. And, the Active Directory was scoped in a way that, everything was still fine. Come to find out, the one of the 4 DNS servers, one of the 2 old legacy ones, had a misconfiguration in, I don't remember if it was the database server or if it was the front end server. There was a misconfiguration in the DNS record on the 4th DNS source for the ticketing system. So most of the time, 90% of the time, this ticketing system was using DNS server 1, 2, or 3. But what I ended up doing was I basically nuked the DNS configuration so it would only use the 4th one, and that is when it was broken. That's what led me down the cookie crumb trail to do that particular old DC, and I found this old incorrectly configured DNS entry for the ticketing system. And yeah, so like most of the time it was using one of the other 3 DNS servers. But in the off chance that it tried to resolve something using that 4th one, the entire ticketing system would go belly up, which, in hindsight is very poor error handling on the ticketing system's part. Like, oh, hey, DNS resolution failed. Let me retry one of the other known good working sources instead of go belly up and just break everything. But anyway, I digress. So anyway, that's a case where DNS has bitten me in the past. I don't know if you've got any stories that stick out, Eric.
I think, and mark your calendars, folks. I'm going to defend the developers on your ticketing system as somebody who has written things like DNS should not be my problem as the developer.
Agreed. You're right.
So,
let me
there's only
complain,
so much.
Eric. Jeez, man.
Oh, complain away. Actually, do that. I don't know though that the devs of that system, like, I'm gonna, because like when you're writing stuff, you're like, I'm just gonna pass. I need a name, and you're gonna pass it and let the operating system deal with it. So it's really the local operating system that
Yep.
So, and yeah, really the most common thing I have multiple things where it was a similar deal to that, where it's just incorrect resolution, because there's an assumption that I don't think they still word it this way. It used to be like the primary DNS server and then the alternate DNS server. And as a language nerd, I always hate that because alternate is a verb.
And
It
then there
doesn't
was
mean
tertiary.
alternative. Well,
Yep.
but point being, they look at it like this is the one that's here, and then this one is only going to come into play if this one doesn't work. Not always true. It may use this one just because, or this one just because, and that's what was going on with yours. It was just like, oh, 1, 2, and 3 are there, but I think I'll go to 4. It's not guaranteed to do that. So like when you're saying DNS is the final boss, it's also the first boss. It just gets stronger as you go up.
That's true.
Right? So the first boss that a lot of new admins run into, and I'm going to go way back to when Windows Server 2000 came out and they shifted off of WINS and NetBIOS and everything and went to IP and DNS and all that stuff. So a lot of people didn't know DNS at the time. I mean, way worse than it is now. And so what they would do is like, all right, I'm going to put in my Active Directory as the primary, and then my ISP is the secondary, so that when Active Directory is down, well, at least the internet will still work. So then what happens is that random chance, well, I think I'll just ask the second one for the address of an internal resource. Boom.
Yep. Yep.
And then by time the same kind of thing, like by the time you get there to do something about it, well, everything looks fine to me. I don't know what's up. Because just for that one little brief second in time, it decided to use the secondary rather than the primary DNS, and I had no idea. And I'm sure we'll get back into that as we go on, but that was the thing I ran into.
Yeah.
And like like logically what you're saying makes sense, but you can't do that. You have to do a different thing that I'm sure we'll talk about.
Yeah. Yep. And I mean, I'm sure that's defined in the spec somewhere, right? What the behavior is. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure there's some latitude based on the vendor, how they choose to use the spec in a certain way or not. So I've never gone that deep into DNS, but
Yeah, reading
just
RFPs
thinking
is,
out
or
loud.
is it RFPs? Yeah, RFPs. Those are not fun to read. They're some of them. Most of them are
you,
not.
you want some
Like,
sleeping material, go find
yeah,
one of them.
like I thought I was a nerd, but this guy, ooh, okay, no thanks.
Oh, I remember I was looking at the spec for oh, what was it? It was like Wi-Fi 6 one time. I don't remember how I got there or why. I was doing something with ruckus access points at the time. Man, that takes me back. Anyway, that's a whole different discussion. And I have to apologize. Hopefully you guys don't hear weed whacking. I rolled the dice. It's very nice here in Michigan today. It's a nice 70 degrees. So I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna leave the windows open. It's nice out. And well, just before we hit record, the neighbor decided to start mowing their lawn. I don't think it's too loud, but
I don't hear it.
anyway, that's good. That's good. Anyway, so you know what I thought we might do here, Eric, is um, kind of walk through what a full resolution looks like. What is the resolution change of me sitting at my PC requesting the IP address via DNS, right? Um, and kind of the way I've always described it is you have a couple of key players slash technologies in play here, right? You have recursive resolvers, root servers, authoritative name servers, and you also have DNS caching, right? These all kind of play a role in the DNS process. And so, you know, when I configure my local DNS resolvers, I usually have to configure a forwarder, what's called a forwarder, right? So if my local DNS server on my internal network has no idea what the IP address for google.com is, forward the request to server X. And you heard me mention 1.1.1.1 at Cloudflare's public DNS servers, very common for DNS forwarder for a lot of organizations. A lot of people use Cloudflare for that. And Cloudflare is actually a recursive resolver, right? That is a resolver that I'm going to go ask to do my lookup on my behalf and then let me know what the result is. Now, let's set caching aside for a second. So let's ignore caching for a second. If that recursive resolver does not know what the IP address for whatever host name I'm asking for, what it's going to do is it's going to go talk to one of the, I think there's 13 root DNS servers. I think it's A through M or whatever. So these are the root DNS servers that control the top level domain level of the DNS hierarchy, you know, the .coms, .nets, you know, that type of thing. Now, these root servers, they don't necessarily, they're not the ones that actually know the answer. What's important about them, though, is they know who has the answer for your given query. So the recursive resolver goes to one of the root servers and says, hey, I'm looking for the IP address for google.com. One of the root servers responds and says, okay, I don't have that, but this guy over here does. And they will actually direct the request to the authoritative name server for google.com, which will actually contain the record that you're looking for. Oh, the authoritative server says, oh, yeah, I know. Yep, google.com is this IP address. It sends it all back through the chain back to your client, and poof, google.com opens inside of your browser. Now, where caching comes into play is any step in that chain one or more of those systems might cache that request. That way, the entire process doesn't have to play out the next time that particular request comes through, right? And so, that's where the TTL value for a given DNS record comes in. A lot of people are kind of confused about time to live. Like, what does that mean? Well, how long should this DNS record be cached at any given place? Right? That's basically what that controls. And so caching is really helpful in that it makes DNS lookups much quicker, but it also introduces the occasional problem too, right? Like DNS cache poisoning attacks or something like that, where an attacker will try to uh, alter the DNS cache for it to resolve in a way that they want it to without it actually the request actually getting all the way to the authoritative server for the real response, right? So I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. Security brain is turning on now, but from a resolution, from a step by step process, that's generally how I explain it. I don't know if there's anything you'd add to that, Eric.
Well, I go simpler. I back up a little bit. So
Yep.
I like to explain the structure of a DNS name.
Right.
So
Good call.
take your google.com. So there is a hidden, well, we'll just say hidden root domain, which is just a dot. But it's always there, so we almost never use it. But you will
Right.
occasionally see names ending with a dot, and they're just showing you this is the root.
Yep.
And then the next thing, and then from there, everything moves to the left. So the next stage in your google.com is com. So that is called a top level domain. So root and then top level. So back to your authoritative thing, you have the root DNS servers, which are the root, and for
Yep.
the period, the empty, whatever, however you choose in your brain to think of it, it's the root domain with just a period. So they know about the com authoritative server and the net and
Yep.
gov and I don't know, help me out here, name, all those other
Guru,
ones. Those are, there you go,
AI,
all
IO.
those. Org, yeah,
Yep.
all those. So they know how to get to those and then inside them. So then there is a authoritative DNS server cluster, but we'll just say one for simplicity's sake, called for the domain called Google, which is a child of com, which is a child of the dot.
Dot.
And that's how the
Yep.
whole thing works. And now we typically can hit things just by going to their domain, but in a fully qualified domain name where you have all of the pieces in there together, there's also a computer item, which is the, and your typical thing will then be the third piece. So you're working from right to left, and I don't know, I guess I'm reversed, right? Y'all are looking at me
Right.
backward. So this is my right. So here, let's go to your right here. So now we're on your right. Here's where the empty root dot, and then com, and then Google, and then over here would be a www. And this is the computer item. The very last item in a fully qualified domain on the left is the computer item. And I remember how confusing that was for people. Like, well, isn't www the least specific thing? No, it's the most specific thing. It's just everybody on the planet has a computer called www, right? So you have empty root dot com, Google, www, and it resolves things in that order. It walks root authoritative, com authoritative, Google authoritative. Google goes, my computer with www has this address and sends the address back.
Yeah.
So, um, and I think that's the one thing. And then another note too: the difference between a recursive DNS and non-recursive is ownership. So
Right.
if you're not working in recursive mode, you start with whatever DNS server you trust. Hey, do you know this? Can you resolve this for me? And if it does not personally know, it'll send back a knack, and then you then say, all right, my next DNS server, do you know? And it'll keep doing that until it runs out of DNS servers. That's a
Yep.
non-recursive. In recursive, when you send it to a recursive one, if it doesn't know, it doesn't tell you anything. It just goes out and then it starts trying to figure out and walking trees and doing all its stuff until it runs
Yep.
out of time and then either sends you a knack or a positive or, whatever. So that's because that can be a little confusing when things work. Like, well, I turned off recursion and yet my resolvers are still going. Well, yeah, that's because they can work. Whatever you're asking knows the answer, and it doesn't have to
Right.
recurse. It's somewhere
And that
along the
could be
line.
caching. right?
Could be
Because
caching.
of caching, it might know the answer. Yep.
Mhm, mhm.
And I think
But a lot of
that might
times you might this is a good security thing because you may wanna have your internal computers never recurse, and then have them go to a DNS server that you trust and either let it do the recursion or, you can really get way deep into this if you really, really want to. I kinda recommend people don't because it's so much lifting, but
it really can be. And it's DNS is one of those protocols where it can really be as simple or as complex as you really want it to be, right? I mean, the protocol is really elegant in that fashion, in my opinion. So it's
I like them that way, I really do. So, because you can
yeah,
start off with go,
for
"I don't
sure.
need to know very much to make it work." You need to know very little to make DNS work, and that's I
Yeah.
prefer that. And then as you become more there's always that but there's no one as religious as a recent convert, so, you'll get in and like, "Oh, look at all this cool stuff DNS will do," and then you really start flipping switches and really making more work for yourself over time, and then you'll kinda get a little bit longer in the tooth and be like, Yeah, I'm not gonna do this much work anymore. I'm
Yeah.
gonna scale that back," so, yeah,
Yep.
DNS is one of those things that's fun like that.
I'm glad you mentioned the recursion thing because, like you said, you turn off recursion for your clients, and yeah, they should only be talking to one or two trusted sources on your network that are allowed to actually do the recursive lookups. But that also makes DNS for your clients potentially more brittle because if there's ever issues with those DNS servers on your network, well, now guess what?
Right.
Your DNS clients, your clients can't recurse and look up DNS records elsewhere, which is a
Mhm.
problem.
Yep.
So
Security is
it's
always a sliding scale of convenience.
yep,
It
as
always
it
is. You
always
gotta
is.
decide how much risk can I tolerate for the trade-off of the convenience. So,
Yep,
always that, where am I gonna put
yep,
it today?
exactly, exactly. And so I think we've covered the full chain, and really, I think really understanding how that lookup chain works and functions and the different components in between start to finish, that has helped me troubleshoot things a lot over the years, understanding how that really works. Because, okay, I've identified that this particular issue is a DNS issue. Oh, okay. Everything looks fine on my local DNS source. So that means DNS is broken somewhere upstream. Well, where? How can I help make that determination? Right. And I remember a case now where we had, oh no, no, my neighbor's got a leaf blower out. Hopefully that's
That
not
one
too
I can
loud.
hear. It's not
Oh,
bad, but
well,
I heard him pick it up.
Hope hopefully that I can cover that in post. Sorry, folks. Anyway, this reminds me of another issue I ran into with DNS. We partnered with a an external DNS provider for the MSP I used to work at, and basically any customer we brought on and managed, we also wanted to manage their public DNS as well too, because I don't know why, but it always ended up being the web developer that typically was the person in charge of all the external DNS records. Well, we have to troubleshoot mail flow and web addresses and things like that. We just wanted to own the DNS. Anyway, we partner with an upstream DNS host, and I remember almost getting into a shouting match with this DNS provider one time because I'm like, I had all the receipts. I'm like, look, DNS resolution is broken with you guys, and they're like, no, no, it's not. There's a misconfiguration on your end. I'm like, I have all. And short answer to the story here. It was their fault. as I as I had stated, they had a misconfiguration in one of their resolvers. But oh man, it's always DNS. It's always DNS. Um, so what we've talked about so far, Eric, has been very specific to just general DNS itself. Now, I've never the question that just popped into my head. I've never dug into this. How many different DNS services or like servers are out there? I so you've got Bind, which is the big one. Um, and then you've got the DNS services that are baked into Windows. I'm not aware of any others. Are
I've
you?
never looked. I might embarrass myself real fast if I just start looking because I don't know. Those are the only two
That
I know, but I've never been an issue. I didn't have a reason to
I
care.
think that's the vast majority because those are the only two I've ever managed. So typically,
Mm-mm.
I've managed Windows or DNS using the DNS service on Windows Server, but I've
Yep.
managed some bind DNS hosts as well. And don't ask me what bind stands for. BIND.
Berkeley Internet
Yes, you're right.
name.
Name. Do you know what? I have to.
I'm sitting
I
here
have
in
to
front of
look
a
it up.
computer. Why don't I
I'm
just
gonna.
ask it?
I'm gonna. It's gonna drive me crazy. Does bind DNS stand for? You're right. It's Berkeley something. Internet
Berkeley
name.
Internet name domain.
Okay, you beat me to it. You beat me to it. So yes. So yeah, I will admit I prefer managing the Windows DNS service personally because it's much easier. Bind has a lot of web front ends that allow you to manage and configure the solution via like a web interface. But I have managed bind DNS via the command line as well too, and simple text files. And this, oh man, this reminds me of yet another DNS story. I remember I was managing a bind DNS server, and for the life of me, I could not get the config file through a successful health check. Thus, the service wouldn't start, right? Like we just added a whole bunch of zones. I'm like, what is going on? And so this was in like a tightened environment. We couldn't install a web interface on it. So everything was via the command line. I'm using Vim. I'm looking through these config files. I about ripped out my hair when I discovered the cause of this of this issue. There was a space, a simple space at the end of one of the lines in the new zones that we added. A space. A goddamn space.
I've had trim trailing spaces on in every single editor I've used for as long as they would let me do that because so
Well,
much
this was
pain comes from that. So much
like
pain.
I was just SSH'd into the box, right? So
Mm.
there no fancy trailing space tools that I'm aware of anyway.
Oh, well, it's what? grep and sed and awk, and it'll do it. I don't know
Yep.
how to make it do it, but it'll do it.
Right. Right.
Oh no, that's awful. That's awful.
Yeah,
Mm.
that's true. grep sed enoch will do that. You know, those are like three of the tools in Unix you always hear about, and like once in a while I'll have to do something that requires one of those, but they're one of those commands that if you don't use them like on the
And
regular, you just
yeah,
forget the syntax. Like I'm terrible at remembering
I can
syntax,
do
and
grep pretty well. I'm pretty
grep I'm
okay
good
with
at. Yep,
grep.
same.
Sed, I'm awful. Absolutely terrible with sed.
D- Don't ask me about
And
awk
awk,
either.
if somebody hasn't already written the awk thing, I don't know what to do. Somebody's gonna have to write that one for me. I don't know.
Yep.
I wouldn't know where to
Oh,
begin with awk. So, but they'll do it. I mean, they'll do all these things. But you know
that's
what?
true.
You
They
know what I
will.
also do it is Notepad and I'll connect that to WinSCP, and I will have my files edited, and I will not be Vim and sed and no. I'll grep. No, I will grep all day long. I don't care about that one. I like that one, but
This was also 2004 as well too. If 2005, somewhere
oh,
in that time frame. This is like Windows 2003 days, if I recall.
mm,
So, ah, anyway.
I'm sorry for you. That's
Speaking of
awful.
Windows, what's that, Eric?
That's awful. I'm sorry for you. I really am.
Oh well, I figured it out after an hour or two. So, oh, anyway. Speaking of
That hurt.
Windows, speaking of Windows, Active Directory. So you and I talk about Active Directory on the show off and on. We've talked about doing an Active Directory episode that we haven't yet. We need to get that on the books. Probably one of many Active Directory episodes. But this is one area where I think Microsoft really shines, and it's I don't want to say not given enough credit for, but it's not talked about enough. How powerful and how simple the DNS implementation is done on Windows Server when it is put alongside Active Directory.
Mm-hmm.
So when you spin up Active Directory, DNS is part of that deployment. And you can use that same DNS instance for regular name resolution. Now, that said, if I'm hosting public DNS with Windows Server DNS services, I probably don't want to host that using Active Directory in the backend. So I can do basic flat DNS with no Active Directory integration if I want to, right? But when we start talking about internal networks, we start talking about Active Directory being used on our network for authentication. Well, we can use Windows Server DNS services alongside Active Directory for local authentication, and it is immensely powerful. DNS is a requirement, I think, in large part because of the SRV records that are used a lot in Active Directory. So, SRV records, correct me if I'm not explaining it properly here, Eric, but SRV records, from my recollection, tell the network and resources on the network, like, hey, here's where you find things like the domain PDC and things like that, right? Core Active Directory components that are associated with the domain.
Of course, an SRV record is part of the general RFC for DNS. It doesn't belong to
True,
Microsoft.
true,
So
very true.
it is for finding services. So like the different types of records, like you have an A record, which matches a name to an IP address. So from before, your domain would have a www A record that points to an IP address. Or you can have a C name record, which points one name to another. So that way, if you want to flatten everything down and say, I want www and the no computer name record to both go the same place, then
Yep,
you would have one point to the other. And then somewhere along the way, there's an A record that has to hit an IP address. The I don't remember all of them, but one of them is the SRV record, which is a service record. And basically, I need to look
yep,
up this service. Where is it? And I think that one, I don't remember the structure of it, but Active Directory takes care of all of its SRV records. You don't have to do that. It just does it.
yep,
So going back to your earlier point of how nice it is, yeah, it handles most of that for you. You can find out later. You can go through the thing and it used to be the thing. It used to be
that one
DC
thing.
promo, and now it's the thing because I don't know. I just go in and add.
PowerShell.
I fool around with PowerShell until I get it right. I don't create enough domains to have any of that memorized, but I can get there. But it used to be DC promo, and you just go through it and you're done. And it's like, do you want to do DNS? Yes, I do, and it just takes care of it for you. The domain, the zones are created, the SRV records are created. It just does it. You don't really need to know anything.
Yep,
It just takes care of it, and that is. I will agree with you. I mean, I have said for years, and I will continue saying it, that Active Directory is Microsoft's killer app, and they don't even know it. They,
nope,
they keep playing with other things, but Active Directory is what keeps you coming back to the Microsoft environment, and the DNS integration is so critical and so helpful when you get it right.
yep, yep. And we're gonna come back to this, but that get it right part is the important bit, right?
Yeah. It'll do a
Because
lot for you automatically, but there's a whole lot it won't do. So
right,
you
yes.
do have to, yeah.
Or
Like
is
we
if
say,
you
it's the first
misconfigure
boss and the
it.
final boss.
Yep, yep. Misconfigured DNS can break a whole lot in Active Directory as well too.
Oh, it'll
Um,
destroy it. Yeah, yeah.
oh yeah, I
But
man, stories on stories. I remember one time having to manually create more than, I don't know, 4 or 5 different SRV records because a overzealous thought themselves an admin was quote unquote cleaning up DNS.
uh-oh.
And like, wait, why can't the DCs talk to each other anymore? why, why, why are some of the core domain components not visible on the network? Why can't people log in? Because they can't find the
Yeah.
global catalog and all that type of stuff. So
And I think a lot of that is self-healing. Like, you can fix a lot of busted stuff by restarting a domain controller,
you really
but
can. That's very true.
because it does.
But
It's like, oh, let me go out here and make sure my SRV records are all aligned, and it'll do all the things. It won't do all the things for you, but it'll do a lot of the things for you. Like, I don't know how far I was, and I'd learned a lot about Active Directory and gotten a whole lot in before I really started peeling back. I see these SRV records, but I've got other things to do right now. But let me come back to that. And it was a while before I got back to them and looked
yep.
at them.
Yep. So for sure, there's a couple other things that the Active Directory DNS side by side thing really brings to your local network, right? We talked about the SRV records, dynamic registration. Dynamic
Mm,
registration is a big one that a lot of people just take for granted because we've had it for so long. I completely understand why we take it for granted. So dynamic registration is. I have a client or a server, something on my network that I add to Active Directory. Active Directory will automatically take that host name and create a record for it inside of DNS automatically.
done.
Yeah. Yep, done.
Done.
I,
It's
as the
fun.
admin,
You join the domain, there's your A record,
it's
all
done.
done.
Yep,
And it
which is
updates it periodically.
fantastic.
Oh, it's lovely. It is
Yep,
beautiful.
fantastic. Now, that said, there are some problems that can happen with dynamic registration, like if you have a lot of turnover with endpoints, right? Maybe you're, I don't know, moving endpoints in and out on a very regular, constant basis. You could end up in a situation where you have records existing for machines that don't exist anymore, right? Depending on how long your lease is configured for and things like that. And that's where domain scavenging comes into play. That's another thing that you can configure inside of Windows Server DNS. Basically, scavenging can be configured to, based on how you configure it, go out and nuke stale DNS records that don't need to be there anymore. And I have seen people set domain scavenging a little too aggressively. That is a
Yeah,
thing you
there's
can
that.
do. At least
Hmm.
back then it was. I don't know if that's still a thing, but
I haven't
I'm
personally run into it because, again, like I was saying before, no one is religious as the recently converted, and so people get in there and turn the screws real hard. Like, oh,
right.
look at all the stuff I can do, and then after a while, like, oh, I made a lot of work for myself by trying to make it cooler, and
Yep.
I don't see as much as I used to. I think enough hands have been burned by that. It's you're
Yeah, I
still
think
gonna
so.
find it, obviously, but
I think so.
um, and the one thing, like, and I kind of wonder about those environments because, as far as I know, is if you do a graceful disjoin, it will also do the reverse and it'll delete the A record at that time. So I don't know.
Typically, yes, assuming everything's working correctly. I've come across a few
Assuming it's
domain.
working, yeah, it has to be able to talk to the domain. It has to be able to, but as
Exactly.
soon as it tells the
Yep.
DC, "Hey, I'm taking this computer out," the domain controller should go, "Cool, I got your A record. We're good."
Yep. Yep.
Should. The one thing I run into a lot that scavenging really helps out on is the reverse records. And we
Yes.
haven't talked about those yet, but that's where my stuff usually gets pretty gross and have to go deal with that. So
Yeah, and so I guess we might as well cover the reverse record really quick. So that basically is, hey DNS server, I have this IP address. What's its host name? Right? I mean, it's exactly the reverse, right? I have an IP address. Tell me what the host name is, um, which is really useful from the standpoint of I'm auditing my network for all the different
uh
devices that are on it, and I have no idea what dot 14 is. No clue.
or I pull a netstat list. Who is
Yep.
that?
Yep.
There's which
Exactly.
netstat should figure it out, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you're using a Linux guest or an iPhone or something, and all you've got is the IP address. And oh well, if you have the and again going back to every record has a type, that's a PTR record
Yep.
pointer. Is what reverse is. So where Active Directory is really good about, I think, in my experience, is really good about keeping the A records cleaned up. Nothing is good about cleaning up PTR records.
I don't know
You'll
why
have
that
stuff out
is.
there that's I
Yeah.
have theories, but I don't really know. And I think it's kind of like one of those things is you can't really be certain that they don't want the PTR record anymore. It's safer to leave it. Where an A
Right.
record is pretty straightforward. I really want to get rid of this. PTR records, and I think when I'm sitting here flat-footed, I don't really have a great example on hand, but I've run into several like, yeah, I get how that, I get why that was left there. That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up because that wasn't on my list here at all. Again, DNS is such a broad thing. We could spend a lot of time on it. Um, but yeah, is there anything else
yeah,
that
we could have like a whole episode on here's how NS lookup works, and I will tell folks since we're probably not going to do that anytime soon. NS lookup, make that your friend. There is NS lookup on Unix based Linux and on
Yep.
Windows both. They don't work the same way, but they're close enough. You know one, you'll at least get your foot. You won't be completely confused on the other. A lot of people will still like, oh, I need to get the IP address for something, so they'll ping it, like ping www.google.com. You get right, and then that's how you get the IP address. NS lookup is the way I would do it because you get more powers Oh, we haven't even talked about another record type, MX, the mail exchanger. When
Yep,
I'm going to send email to a domain, the MX record is how I do that. It's like an SRV record, but it's specific to email.
yep,
So NS lookup will do that for you. Ping will not. So
yep. How do I deliver email to andyontech.com? Oh, here's the
yep,
MX record for andyontech.com. You
yep.
know, if you go
So
look at it, it points at M365's servers, right?
yep. So that's how your mail client knows where to send email to. Well,
Yep.
I guess the mail client doesn't care. The mail client, well, if I go back in time all the way to POP3, it was your mail client, but it's not anymore. Now you're going through, you save an email and your mail server picks it up and your mail server has to do the MX resolution so it knows where to send it. So,
Yep. You
yeah.
know, there's a plug here for our episode on abstraction. I think there's a lot of abstraction that has happened in this area as well too, right? So, yeah, you mentioned that was the next area on my list here, right? Common failure modes, how to diagnose issues, NS lookup, first tool on my list, right?
It's what I get
Excuse
for
me.
skimming the show notes instead of reading
No,
them.
no,
That's
no,
my
no.
fault.
That's where I was going next too, right? You know, you've got dig, resolve dash DNS name. Unix has a whole bunch of tools as well too, but I think those are the big ones that I always use, right? Ping, NS lookup, dig. I rarely use the PowerShell one. Um, I also want to mention mxtoolbox.com because there's a lot of times where you want to test DNS from like outside of your local network for some reason. mxtoolbox.com provides a fantastic array of tools to help you with that, right? You can do A record lookups right from there. You can look at pointer records. You can look at authoritative name servers. You can check SPF, DMARC, which those are, this is another area where DNS comes into play, right? SPF, DMARC, DKIM, those are all email security features, protocols. Um, SPF tells the world, hey, any email that comes from my domain should come from this IP address or these IP addresses. DKIM is basically a a digital stamp that gets attached to every piece of email that basically proves once the email reaches its recipient that it was not altered in transit. There is a DNS text record that helps with that verification. That's another record we haven't mentioned yet, TXT, a text record. It's basically a string that you can put inside of a DNS record that certain services like DKIM looks for. You have DMARC, domain. Um, oh, domain. I talk about this stuff in my day job all the time. Why can't I remember what DMARC stands for? DKIM is domain keys identified mail. DMARC is domain messaging authentication, reporting, and conformance. There, I did it. It's a
Wow.
mouthful. But
Well, I'm still
DMARC,
salty because I have all this telco experience. So for me, demarc is the demarcation point where the
I know,
telephone
right?
responsibility stops and yours begins. That's the demarc.
Yep, yep. Well, DMARC from an email security perspective tells recipient mail servers what do you do with this piece of email should SPF and DKIM and or both of those checks fail. Should you quarantine it? Should you just drop it? Should you deliver it? Right? That's what DMARC does. But all of those protocols are configured in DNS because mail servers, they need some common place where they can go to grab pieces of information, in this case, strings of text inside of a DNS record to facilitate that authentication process, right? That's another,
What a
I,
lovely, simple way to do things. It's just great. The DNS
right?
administrator can change those. Nobody else can. It's just it's lovely. Here's a
Right?
super simple thing we've had forever. Someone's like, you know what I can do with that, right?
Right? uh, anyway, just an example of all the different things that you can do with DNS. I feel like DNS is a protocol that has grown vastly over and above what its original intended use case was.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Once upon a time, it was just a text file with here's an IP address, here's a name.
Yep.
That's a DNS. That's what it did. And you just add and remove lines to it. Everything's fine. And now
Yep.
look what we're doing with it. I mean, it's absolutely grown.
Yep. Exactly. which, is kind of a nice segue into my next area here that I want to cover before we kind of start wrapping things up. I wanted to touch on DNS security real quick. So think about the process of DNS, right? So I am a client workstation. I ask for a certain I ask for a certain URL, right? A certain host name. The DNS server goes out, grabs that, tells me what the IP address is. My browser goes to it, right? After I hit enter, that's a completely automated process. Now, that's all well and good. As long as we assume that everything involved in that chain is on the up and up, everything is completely legit. Well, surprise, threat actors love to meddle with DNS because if they can change an actual record to a very high volume, trusted by name host name, I'm just completely picking out one off the top of my head, Nike.com, right? As an example. I'm not saying there's a problem with Nike.com. I'm just simply using it as an example. So now that I've made our lawyers happy, right? It's just an example. But let's say I was a threat actor and somehow I gained access to the DNS records for Nike.com. I know that a lot of people go to Nike.com. Maybe I fashion a website that looks very similar to Nike.com and asks for payment details. If I change the DNS, the IP address associated with Nike.com to a server I control, imagine all of the mischief that I can get up to. So when you're thinking about your risk profile, your security strategy for your infrastructure, DNS needs to be one of the most tightly guarded things inside of your infrastructure, not just on your local network, but your public DNS as well too, right? Because there's so much mischief and things that threat actors could do with it. And that's why we created a couple of other protocols as an industry. We have DNSSEC, right, which is a feature in DNS where we, without getting too into the weeds on it, DNSSEC basically allows me to do a lookup of a DNS record, and there's a digital digital authentication stamp on that record that tells me the response I got from that record is from the actual authoritative DNS server for that record. Again, meaning that, nothing was tinkered with in the process between me and the DNS server, right? That said, again, if an attacker had legit backend access to that particular DNS record, doesn't matter if DNSSEC is in place, right? Because it'll still be a legit lookup, even though the threat actor tinkered with it, right? I'm speaking a lot of hypotheticals here, but you get the idea. A couple other security things around DNS. The big one that you've been hearing about a lot over the last couple of years is DNS over HTTPS. So because DNS is such a long in the tooth protocol, it's been around for what, like 40 years, Eric, or something like that? 30 years?
Longer than I've been in the business, because
Yeah, it's been around
it
for
was
a long
already
time.
pretty. Yeah, when I became aware of DNS, and it was fairly early in my career,
Yeah.
it was a known
Yeah.
quantity. So,
And so DNS records, if I get out Wireshark, DNS requests, it's all plain text by default, right? It's all plain text. So if I'm the ISP sitting in between you and your DNS resolver, I can reasonably infer all the different places that you're going to on the internet just based on DNS traffic because it's all in plain text. DNS over HTTPS is designed to resolve that particular issue in that it sends DNS requests over HTTPS, therefore everything's encrypted and it cannot be snooped on. However, that does not solve, this is DNS adjacent, so I'm going to allow it in this podcast. It doesn't solve there's one other issue that this doesn't solve. It's when you do the DNS lookup, my browser makes contact with the destination web server, there's that initial hello message, right? That initial hello that says, hey, I'm trying to access this web page, and the server responds back. By default, even if you use DNS over HTTPS, that hello message is not encrypted. And so the ISP could still use that to infer what type of websites you're trying to go to as well too. And that's where ECH, Encrypted Client Hello, comes into play, and that's another stack on top of DNS over HTTPS. So that's you know, if you're interested in digging into that more, I'll put a link in the show notes to both DNS over HTTPS and Encrypted Client Hello. That's a rabbit hole I've gone down a couple times over the years. But yeah, DNS related there. Man, we haven't even talked about DNS filtering yet. So again, you think about the DNS process. Again, I still have my security hat on here, so feel free to stop my roll anytime, Eric. But we talk about DNS filtering. I think about the process, right? Hey, I want to go to, website, DisneyWorld.com, whatever. It gives me that IP address. Well, that mechanism lends itself very, very well for content filtering as well. So a lot of like web content filters that you'll see out on the market, I mentioned it earlier in this episode, right? They will actually use DNS as part of that filtering mechanism. Hey, you requested DNS name, host name, XYZ, right? Oh, that's on my naughty list, so you can't browse there. I mentioned Cloudflare earlier, how 1.1.1.2, that public resolver, again, Cloudflare maintains a list of known malicious IP addresses and their associated host names. If you have a client that tries to resolve one of those known malicious host names, instead of resolving you to the actual known bad IP, they resolve you to 0.0.0.0. You effectively go nowhere, thus keeping the endpoint safe from whatever is on that known bad IP. So you'll see DNS used in security filtering from that degree as well. So, yeah, I'm sure I'm missing some, but those are the security tools relating to DNS that come off the top of my head. I don't know if you want to add anything, Eric. Again, I could get rolling on any of those and probably go for another 20 minutes.
You are the security guy, so I'm gonna stay off of your lawn.
The other thing I wanted to mention here, again, uh, from an attacker perspective, I may use your internal DNS against you as well. So if I infiltrate your network, a lot of attackers are using the living off the land method of running attacks these days. And if you're unfamiliar with that, basically what that means is I break into your network. I want to stay hidden at all costs. So I'm going to use as many of your built-in Windows services, Linux services, in-house DNS servers as I possibly can to avoid detection, right? I want my traffic to just look like business as usual. And so from an attack detection standpoint, you can also use DNS to spot potentially fishy things too, right? Not mail phishing in this case. But maybe you are looking at outgoing DNS lookups like, wait, what's this weird funky .ru host name lookup that's happening? What's up with that? You could use it to spot that type of stuff. And obviously when there's malware involved, ransomware involved, there has to be a command and control server as well. In the security community, we call that C2, right? C2 is means command and control. That's the server that malware and or ransomware is going to report to. You can often see that type of traffic inside of DNS lookups as well. So that's one area where you can kind of spot malicious activity happening within your own environment. So one area to look when you're in that incident response portion of the game. So, well, before we wrap up, Eric, one thing that I realized I did not put on my list is like common DNS record types. We've mentioned some of them. I'm trying to think of the ones that I have used frequently over the years. A record, right, which is basically what we've been talking about this whole time, right? Host name is associated with IP address. Pointer record is the reverse of that. We talked about MX. I mentioned text record briefly. Text record, basically, like I said, it allows me to embed a string of text inside of a text record for external services. I mentioned the email security ones, SPF, DMARC, DKIM. NS record. We have not talked about NS records yet.
Nope.
It's a name server record. So earlier when I was talking about that authoritative name server, so again, I go to do a recursive lookup. The recursive resolver says, hold on, I'll go find out who has that. It talks to the root. The root server then goes and figures out whoever the authoritative name server is for that domain. The NS record for a given domain is what defines the authoritative name server for that domain. That's what the NS record does. Another one I run into occasionally in my MSP days, late MSP days, because they haven't been around that long, quad A record. Have you ever dealt with a quad A record, Eric?
I remember it, but I didn't want to say anything about it because I don't remember what it is or what it does.
It doesn't surprise me. It's an oddball one. That's an IPv6 name record is what quad A is. Because I remember
should have
coming
known
across
that, but I thought,
yeah,
no, surely it's something worse than that. But
because I come across that and I'm like, quad A, what the hell is that? No, IPv6. And of course, I'm never going to remember an IPv6 address because I can barely remember normal IPv4 addresses. Trying to think if there's any others. Any that I missed.
if you go look, I'm sure you'll find a list of stuff you've never heard of before.
Oh, I'm sure.
But I know we've hit all the big ones that,
yep.
Your normal, because I've been in on like the DNS manager for one of my hosting providers, and they'll have a drop down list, and I don't know what all of them are. I don't think. We'll just say I don't, because I don't think I do.
Oh, good times.
I'm looking for the A. Oh, there it is. That's what I want.
There it is. That's right. That's right. Let me look at the common questions I wrote down here. Should I run my own DNS or just point everything at a public resolver? I think we kind of answered that, but I want to be very specific about this. Should you run your own DNS internally? Yes. If you're asking about maybe running
corporate in an organization in your house, I wouldn't. Not anymore. I used to. I don't do it anymore.
I'm just going to look to the side here because I may or may not have 4 DNS services running inside the house.
I don't think it's bad. It's just you said should. Should. That's a different word than can I. Like, well, if you want to do that, knock yourself out. I'm not going to stop you. I do have DNS servers running here, but I also have an Active Directory domain running here. But for the regular, like the wife wants to go do whatever, her internet stuff, look up her law things, then she doesn't go through my DNS because, I don't like if I want to power down and she can't get to the internet, then that's my fault and I'm the bad guy. And I don't want to get in trouble because,
Yep. I hear you. Yep. Yeah. So same thing. So all my stuff is on its own network, and yeah, there's 4 DNS sources there for reasons which I'll explain in a different podcast. But for the general house network, yeah, it's just stupid simple, as non-brittle as possible. Absolutely. To come back to the question, right? Should you run your own external DNS service? Unless you have a very, 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 very good reason to run your own, I would highly question running your own, right? Typically, you're going to be a host or you're a high security organization that needs tight control of their own DNS services, which even then I would question whether or not I could secure my own public DNS services as well as the big DNS providers can. But I don't know, maybe there's some regulatory stuff out there that might require, again, I'm pulling stuff out of my hat here.
And I would assume if there is a regulatory thing, there's already somebody out there who's providing a solution for people who fall under that regulation, and you're still competing with somebody who has people who do that for a living all day versus you adding it into your already long list of things to do.
Yeah, for sure. So, well, looking at the clock here, Eric, we're an hour and 10 minutes in. I suppose we should wrap this one up. Always good having you, my friend. And we've been talking about a lot of fundamentals lately. So who knows what'll be next on our list. There's all kinds of stuff to choose from. But I've been wanting to get to DNS for a while, so I'm glad we could have today's talk.
Yeah, me too.
So good one for sure. So anyway, appreciate you spending some time with us today, folks. Hopefully you found some value in today's episode. As a reminder, you can find all the links associated with the show at www.sysadminweekly.com. Speaking of DNS resolution, you can get all the links to the YouTube, the Apple podcast version. But there's a link to our newsletter there, a link to our GitHub discussions board. Which reminds me, I'm wanting to do an episode coming up about like friends and family IT support stories, which there's always funny ones. I have a couple of funny ones to share on that one, but I want to share the community's funny and interesting friends and family IT support stories. So I've got a post out on the GitHub discussion board specifically for folks to share their stories. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. If you want to comment on any of the episodes, you can leave comments on the YouTube and Spotify versions of the show. And, I meant to call out a comment or two at the beginning of this episode, Eric, but I was so excited to talk about DNS, apparently, that I forgot to grab those. So we'll have to do that in the next episode. I love to cover comments on the show when I can. So again, leave us a comment there, or if you want to get straight to our inbox, you can always email us at contact@sysadminweekly.com as well, too. Again, MX record there for that particular DNS lookup. See what I did there? Anyway, I think that's my sign I need to wrap up the show because I'm increasingly off the rails here. But appreciate you all spending some time with us, folks. Have a good one. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you again next week for a future episode of SysAdmin Weekly. Have a good one.